no trouble in finding a little bit of success there. Sorry, I'm having a little issue with my live stream. So looks like we're still live. Okay. Got a notification saying something disconnected. I said, okay, great. That's not good, but I think we're good now. Okay, so if it disconnected, reconnect. It says live, so we should be good here. Refresh that real quick. All right. Yeah, I think we're okay. All right. So no success at all last night. I had faded Bam Adebayo in my largest slate, like the one that I had the most lineups and money in. That was a mistake. I just wasn't sure exactly what was going to happen there, and I just wasn't feeling that matchup. So it is what it is. You win some, you lose some. Some nights you lose very little. Some nights you win very little. Other nights you lose everything you have in, and that's fine too. It's another day. And so what we're going to do is we're going to rock. We're going to move forward. We're going to go through the slates. We're going to do the best we can. I've messed with my lighting a little so you can see my cameras, kind of trying to decide what to do with it. We'll see what we stick with there. Kind of every time I sort of move my head, you can kind of see my camera going, what are you doing? So, it is what it is. But let's pay attention to today's slate. Let me see if I can do something with this autofocus really quick. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe let's get going here. I've got a very limited amount of time. We're going to try to bust through all 11. Here I go up into the corner. I've got everything updated. I've got all my salaries in. I think off the screen here, get my info up. I think we're going to try to start. We'll see where the odds sheet looks like. Portland at Cleveland. Let's look at injuries first. Starting with Portland. MNOOPP. Okay, Portland. No injuries on Portland starting lineup. Dame, CJ, Norm Powell, Covington, who, yeah, you know, Nurkic. Let's pull up this game and take a quick look. Let's see. Portland, Cleveland. Cleveland's been playing a little bit better. You know, they're a little bit surprising. They're not going to win a ton of games, but they're going to be good matchups for a lot of teams. Portland is highly susceptible to losing this game, in my opinion. It's got a 216.5 point total. I mean, it looks like it's pretty even. Portland's for sure favored, but you know, this game, I don't know if I don't think this game has any blowout written all over it. No injuries to speak of for Portland, so let's just get down to the tacks here and see what we can do with Portland. Getting rid of Cleveland for a minute. You know, Dame has that low price tag, and the reason for that is just that he is Dame, you know, and he hasn't been putting up Dame-type numbers the last bit of this season, or first part of this season, I should say. $8,300 salary, it's kind of like, you know, giving someone an extra die. You know, when hey, we need you to roll the highest number possible, and we're going to give you and only you an extra die. Damian Lillard is interesting, and the reason is because you know what he can do. This is a guy who can score 50, 60, 70 fantasy points if he needs to. He hasn't yet. He's only averaging 34.6 fantasy points per game on 1.04 fantasy points per minute, not getting close to value. But with his salary there and 33 minutes a game, it's just a matter of time. This could be a game against Cleveland where he has the ball in his hands already more than he does. A 29 usage rate, second only to CJ. So that's something to think about. Man, there's just so much going on here that I'm trying to avoid so I can get through this stream for you guys. Today's slate's so weird. I'm going to get to more CJ than I probably should. We'll see how that affects me. McCollum, or more Dame than I probably should. We'll see how that affects me. McCollum, 8,000. I like that salary. 38.3 fantasy points per game, 1.12 fantasy points per minute. A higher usage than Dame, a higher value than Dame. You're probably going to have to get to more CJ. I mean, if you had to pick between the two, you're taking CJ. Lillard's ceiling is higher, and so if you're playing for ceiling, salary wise, I mean, you've got to get some Dame. That's if you're playing for ceiling. If you're playing to get 6x value, CJ might be the way to go. Looking at Nurk, 7,500. That's an okay salary. He doesn't get the minutes he should. 25 minutes, 33.7 fantasy points, 1.33 fantasy points per minute, 4.5x value. This guy should get probably 6 more minutes per game. If he did, he'd help them a lot more than he does. I mean, he's got Norm Powell getting more minutes than Nurkic and averaging a lot less fantasy points per game, 0.8 per minute. Value's terrible. Still, Anthony Simons, 4.68x value. He just doesn't get any minutes, 23 minutes. Nothing to talk about there. Only in an injury case are you looking at those guys. Robert Covington, he's been letting everyone down all season long. 27 minutes per game, 15 fantasy points per game, 0.57. It doesn't get much worse than 0.57 fantasy points per minute. So that's a total fade for me. Covington, yeah, he's going to be a world beater 3 times a year, but you can't play him in 82 slates. You can't. It's just not what it is. So get a bunch of CJ, take your flyers on Dame, get a little bit of Nurkic, and move forward from Portland. Let's take a look at Cleveland. Cleveland injuries. I think it's Kevin Love. Well, let's see. Might as well just look. Lowry listed as day-to-day. I guess I didn't see if anything happened to him specifically. Missed several games. Oh, health and safety. All right. So Lowry out probably with COVID or exposure. Kevin Pankos, Isaac Okoro out. I was fairly certain that Kevin Love was out today. Not showing up on this specific injury report, but double check other injury reports because I think he's listed as out. Right now I'm showing, and let me refresh the starting lineups here and make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah. So Darius Garland, Colin Sexton, Chetty, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen. If Chetty is starting, you got to get to some Chetty. You know, I've been fading Garland and Sexton, and that's been successful for me so far this year. Jarrett Allen is who he is. Let me look at these salaries are just ridiculous. Hold on. Nope, not numbers. Let's look at currency. Nope. Well, sort of. General? Yeah, there we go. That's what we want. Sorry about that, fellas and folks. I mean, these are all weird. Look at this. Okay. I don't know why. Sometimes they just show up weird like that. I got to redo them every day. Jarrett Allen is who he is, $6,700. You can't complain about that. He's a 1.05 fantasy per minute guy, 4.7x value. Get to some Jarrett Allen. The matchup is good against Nurkic and Covington. So get to some Jarrett Allen. He'll have the ball in his hands. Probably not as much as he should with the 14% usage rate, which is atrocious. Evan Mobley, $100 cheaper, 6,600. 3 more minutes. Well, 1 more fantasy point. About the same fantasy points per minute of higher value at 5x value. Only one other than Rubio averaging 5x value or better. Get to some Evan Mobley tonight. He's in the starting lineup. I really care for that quite a bit, actually. You can get to some Sexton always. 0.82 fantasy points per minute has not been impressive. So for me, that's a total fade. Lowry's out. Garland, 0.89 fantasy points per minute. It's not going to cut it unless he has a massive game. Kevin Love, he's coming off the bench anyway at 20 minutes, so you can probably avoid him altogether. Rubio's interesting because coming off the bench, he's getting 28 minutes. So that's something where he's getting 28 minutes, 29 fantasy points, 1.05 fantasy points per minute, 5.74x value. You got to get to some Rubio. He's even as a bench, as a value play at 5,100, Rubio could get you some places that you need to go. Chetty's starting at 4,500. That's going to be total chalk. If that holds and he really is starting. I mean, yeah, 12.89 fantasy points per game. 0.74 fantasy points per minute, terrible value. All the way across, statistics are out the window on this one. At 4,500, if he can get 30 minutes or 27 minutes, starting numbers, that's going to feel pretty good for Chetty. And at 4,500, you're going to have to get some of that. That's it for Cleveland. Let's add them back in. Let's get the next game going. Knicks at Indiana, total score 216. Do with that with what you will. Let's see. Team start with Knicks. Nope. Knicks. Yeah. Come on. Okay, we're gonna bust through this one. Julius Randle's $9,300. He's getting 1.23 fantasy points per minute, almost a 5x value. Actually, nobody on the team averages 5x value. It's a little sad. A little bit sad, but you're going to have to get to some Julius Randle. I like this against Indiana. You can feel pretty good about that. Sabonis isn't known for his defense. Miles Turner's hit and miss. So Julius Randle at 9,300, I'm going to have 20-25% of that. I like that guy. Gets a lot of minutes, gets a lot of fantasy points per minute. Nothing to complain about there, not one thing. A little bit of a pace down spot, but the Knicks are captain pace down, so they love that. I've been playing a little bit of Barrett, 0.87 fantasy points per minute overall, 4.7x value. His price is good at 6,400. His ceiling is pretty good into the 40s. So look at Barrett. Kemba, he's now getting closer to a fantasy point per minute at 0.98. I'm going to want to see a couple more games out of him before we go too bananas. $6,000 isn't that bad for him at 28 minutes a game, but I want to get him closer to 30, 31, 32 minutes per game and over a fantasy point per minute before I'm all in on Kemba. Fournier always screws me over, 0.87 fantasy points per minute. I'm fading him. Mitchell Robinson, 0.83 fantasy points per minute. I'll be fading him. Derrick Rose not getting the minutes he needs in order to be a solid DFS play for today. So in this one, I'm looking at Julius Randle. I'm looking at a little bit of Barrett. If you're a Kemba Walker guy or person, feel free to get a little Kemba Walker, but I will not be getting much from Kemba today. I like Indiana a little better. Looks like Brogdon has a Q tag today. Let's look at injuries. Well, let's look at the Knicks, too, real quick, before we just let it all go. I'm scrolling too fast today, too. Okay. Taj Gibson, Nerlens Noel still, so nothing to worry about there. Going back to Indiana. Man, I just keep going right past it. Jeremy Lamb listed day-to-day. Malcolm Brogdon, questionable day-to-day. Planning to get back out there tomorrow night. This was yesterday, so we're a lot closer to probable. Okay. Well, it looks like Brogdon has a Q tag. We're going to have to leave him in. Yesterday he said he'd be playing tonight. So, as for now, Brogdon's in. LeVert, Duarte, Sabonis, and Miles Turner. I've been getting a lot of Miles Turner and Sabonis. I like Brogdon when he's playing. Let's take a look. Sabonis at 9,800. Anytime a payoff option is 10,000 or less, I mean, you've got to look seriously at them because it can help build out the rest of your lineup. 38 minutes a game, 44 fantasy points a game, 1.17 fantasy points per minute, 4.5x value as a baseline. Can't complain about that. Sabonis' defense is not great, so you're not looking at huge stocks. Malcolm Brogdon at 8,400, getting 37 minutes if he plays, 43 fantasy points per game, 1.16 fantasy points per minute. There's a bunch of guys on this team that are getting over a fantasy points per minute. The value on Brogdon is 5.1x value. Nothing to complain about there as far as a baseline. That's what he averages. Karis LeVert is back, 19.5 minutes. I'm going to have to see him get more like, 28 minutes, 29 minutes, 30 minutes before I'm really going to be looking at him as a serious option for DFS. When he is in there, his usage is off the charts ridiculous. So you can feel good about that for when he does play 1.26x fantasy points per minute. So it's really going to be a numbers game there. Well, if he's starting, I know they're easing him in, but if he's starting, when he gets north of 24, 25 minutes, that'll be a more viable play for me. Miles Turner at 6,600. I mean, 1.19 fantasy points per minute, 4.85x value is not great, but at $6,600, I mean, yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, you can get probably 32 fantasy points cheaper. I like Chris Duarte, 35 minutes a game. The minutes are there, 0.79 fantasy points per minute. It's a little low, but 5x value. He's getting the big minutes, third on the team in minutes. So I don't know how you can be upset about that. TJ McConnell, in a slate like tonight, I don't think so. Justin Holiday, I don't think so. Gets 30 minutes, but 0.6 fantasy points does nothing for me per minute. So get to some Sabonis. If Brogdon plays, get to some Brogdon. Get to a little bit of Miles Turner. I don't think tonight's the night he's going to go for 70, but you're going to have a low percentage of him, in my opinion. So feel free to feel good about that. Okay, next game, Boston at Orlando. Okay, we're going to add New York back in and go to the game. Boston and Orlando. Get rid of this one. Okay. Then we are going to look at Boston first. All right. Boston first. The total lineup on this one's low, 212. Orlando are underdogs, but the way they shot against the Wolves the other night, you never know what's going to happen with a team like that. They're scrappy, they're crappy, but they do have good nights. So if Cole Anthony goes bananas again, which he won't because that's a Timberwolves thing, then look at Cole Anthony. But let's start with Boston. I don't know what they have for injuries. Let's find out together. No injuries at all. Love to see that. I've seen more of that already this early in the season than I have in a long time, so that's pretty awesome. Time off is good for players, I think. So, all right, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Al Horford, Time Lord, Those are the guys in the starting lineup. I like Tatum. For whatever reason, I always fade him. I'm not trying to rhyme there, but I'm being serious. 9,600 anytime again, a pay-up option under 10 grand. You're going to have to get to him. 38 minutes, almost 39 minutes, 44 fantasy points, 1.14 fantasy points per minute. Doesn't hit value because of price. Jaylen Brown, same thing. About the same amount of minutes, a little less production, but he's also $1,200 cheaper. So 40.5 fantasy points per game, 1.05 fantasy points per minute. I'm probably going to get more Brown than Tatum tonight, but I'll get a little of both. Probably more Brown. Horford is one of these guys, 7,900, getting 44 fantasy points per game, 1.41 fantasy points per minute. That's a resurgence, 5.49x value. I mean, you're going to have to get to some Horford, too. Especially in this matchup, you got to get to Horford. He's going to go bananas. Don't quote me on that. Time Lord's been letting me down. He's a 1.01 fantasy points per minute. It seems like every time I play him, though, I'm getting like 16, 18, I don't know. Not enough fantasy points. I'll probably still get to a little bit of them, but because you gotta. Dennis Schroeder's getting almost 32 minutes, 0.98 fantasy points, 5x value. The value's there. I mean, those prices, 6,200, 6,400. Marcus Smart, even at 5,800, although he hasn't produced at the level of these other guys, 0.73 fantasy points per minute. That doesn't do anything for me. But among those guys, I mean, there's 6 guys getting over 30 minutes right now. 6. So, and 2 guys getting real close to 40 minutes. So, in a matchup against Orlando, you're going to have to play a bunch of these Boston players. And I'll get to a ton of them, too, for sure. So, Jaylen Brown over Tatum, Horford, for sure, more Horford than Williams. A mid amount of Dennis Schroeder. You know, a little bit of Marcus Smart is okay, too. You know, it's like those 6 guys, you're going to have to get to percentages of all of them. You can feel okay about it with this matchup for sure. Nobody over 8K on Orlando. Cole Anthony. Let's look at our injuries real quick here. I got to hurry up. We got to get moving, you guys. Gary Harris, E'Twaun Moore, Michael Carter Williams, Fultz, and Jonathan Isaac we know about. Gary Harris listed as questionable. So he just, in my mind, he's not starting anyway, so you just got to fade that. Cole Anthony, 7,100, 34 minutes, 1.1 fantasy points per minute. I'm not sure. I think you can get 37 fantasy points per game for cheaper than 7,100. He does carry a 5x value, 5.2x value, so that's good. So you can get to a percentage of him against Boston. You know, that's a team that's been blowing it a lot lately, but usually because of defense, and Orlando's not necessarily known for that. Mo Bamba's a fantasy point per minute guy, gets real close to value, so you're going to have to get some of him at 6,600. Wendell Carter, same thing, you know, 1.07 fantasy points per minute, getting more fantasy points than minutes, so doesn't quite get to value, but close. Franz Wagner's a surprise. 0.84 fantasy points per minute doesn't get there. For me, 5x value does. So I'll have to get him in a small percentage of 5,400 of my lineups. Okeke can shoot, but doesn't get the minutes. Terrence Ross is one of those guys that can go bananas, but at 0.63 fantasy points per minute, there's no way he's getting anywhere near any of my lineups tonight. So there you have it on that game. I think we're moving at a pretty good clip now. So let's add Boston back in. Let's look at the next lineup matchup here. Bulls at Philadelphia. 215.5 total on that one. Philly is favored slightly. There we go. Okay. Starting with Chicago. Well, that can't be right. Is that it? That can't be right. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, I know Chicago's got more than 9 guys on their roster. Right? What did I do here? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What am I missing on Chicago, you guys? Just give me a second here. Go back to my spreadsheet really quick. pull back all the games. Okay, what I'm going to do real quick here, and it's going to mess everything up, but I might as well look at it. I'm going to delete this whole thing. Then, make sure it's all deleted. That looks fine. Then I'm going to go back. Oop, I emboldened everything. Why did I do that? There we go. All right. Sorry about this, you guys. Nope. No. Yeah, redo the number thing. Okay. Let's look at Chicago again. See what happens. Chicago and Philly. And that looks like more players to me. I don't know what I did before. Well, that's definitely more than 9 players now. Weird. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to play any of them. So, I just wanted to make sure we're getting the right information. Sorry that took a minute. Okay. Chicago, Pat Williams, Kobe White. Sidelined. Okay. Lonzo Ball, Javonte Green, Zach LaVine in, DeMar DeRozan, and Vucevic. Okay. Vucevic at 8,400 is another one of these pay-up guys for cheap. 34 minutes a game, 40 fantasy points, 1.19 fantasy points per minute, 4.8x value on average. You're going to need some of him, not a ton. Not 40, 50% or anything, but you can get some. I like DeRozan better tonight. 8,200, 41 fantasy points per game, 1.18. Also, he hits 5x value. That's great. Get DeMar DeRozan, get a bunch of them. Zach LaVine, get a bunch of Zach LaVine. 8,100, 34.7 minutes per game, 39 fantasy points, 1.12 fantasy points per minute, 4.8x value is fine as a baseline. That guy can shoot the crap out of the ball, so it's just a matter of time until he does. $6,000 salary, 34.7 minutes per game, 32 fantasy points per game, 0.92 on Lonzo. Lonzo's a guy I kind of usually fade around. 5.35x value is not bad. In this matchup against Philly, I think it's a pace down spot for everybody. You're not going to go too bananas here. I'm going to get some DeMar. I'm going to get a little Zach. And then I'm going to let Vucevic kind of go, maybe 10%, something like that. So you don't have to go bananas on Vooch. Although I do like Vooch. I really do. I play him I'm almost always over the field on Vooch. Did I just do the same team? Thought I did. There we go. All right. Philly's an interesting team too. Joel Embiid playing probably. Let's look at Philly. I think there'd be no reason why he wouldn't right now. Not listed. Toby out. Medical protocols. Ben Simmons out. We know why. As Embiid in. Okay, so this is one of those things you're going to have to get to some cork Maz. And all these guys look pretty good. Maxi's a letdown lately, so I'm going to get some Curry. I'm going to get some cork Maz. Let's look at Embiid at 9,700 is a totally low price for him. Here's a guy that'll get you 60 or 70 fantasy points once in a while. 31% usage. Got to go with that. 1.4 fantasy points per minute. Get yourself a ton of Embiid. Really, realistically, Embiid's going to be pay up chalk at 9,700, in my opinion. Ben Simmons and Toby are out. Andre Drummond will probably drum up a few more minutes. $5,800 salary, 29 fantasy points on 18 minutes. 1.56 fantasy points per minute, 5x value. You're going to have to get to some Drummond, just as even as a backup, he could put up starter numbers for cheap at 5,800, especially with Toby out. Get some Drummond. You can get to some Maxey. He's not impressing me lately. Seth Curry's not impressing me lately. Their per minute scores are not good enough for me. The only thing they have going for him is minutes. So if you need minutes and then hope, you can do that. Thibault might get you some stocks, but 0.89 per minute isn't doing anything for me either. Let's get to the next game, you guys. We wasted enough time messing around with this one. Okay, next game is Toronto, Washington. I can tell you who I'm not playing tonight. He will not be in my player pool, and I'm sure it'll screw me over, but I will not be playing Chris Boucher. Yeah, just because every time I do, what do you have, 5.2 the other day total? I was if he would have just gotten to his projection, I would have binked the piggy bank because I had 411 something and was in the top 100 or top couple hundred. I don't remember. Either way, 5 points, and I got into the top 1% of 1%. So the rest of my lineup was spectacular. Injuries for Toronto. Scotty Barnes. Let's see what it says here. Not a great sign. Ruled out. Okay. Scotty Barnes, Yuta, Pascal, all out. Well, I think we know that. 0.97 fantasy points per minute. I mean, there's only one guy on this team that's getting close to value or getting value, and that is Gary Trent. Scotty Barnes is getting close, but to get there, OG Anunoby gets close at 4.97. Anunoby I like better. He's basically a fantasy point per minute guy, a 4.97x value. That's good. So get some OG. I'm going to have some tonight, especially with Scotty out. Gary Trent, get to him, 32.9 fantasy or minutes per game, 29 fantasy points per game. I think that'll tick up tonight again with Scotty out, 5.3x value. Those are the two guys on this team that you're going to get to. I like Precious. He just doesn't get minutes. So until he's getting 27 minutes, I'm not interested anymore. Okay. That's it for Toronto. They're not high on my list. Never are. Washington, let's look at injuries there. Bertans. Oh, what's going on with Bertans? Forced out of Monday's game after twisting his ankle. Ruled out a day in advance for Wednesday. Okay. Bertans out. Anthony Gill, Winston, Hachimura, Thomas Bryant. Starting lineup, Dinwiddie, Beal, KCP, Kyle Kuzma, Gafford. Washington's an interesting team for sure. Another one of these young, scrappy, chip on their shoulder type of team. I like Bradley Beal. Pay up options below 10 grand are my bag. So 9,100, you can't complain about that. 36.5 minutes, 40 fantasy points, 1.12 fantasy points per minute. That's a guy you'll have to get to some of, especially against Toronto for sure. Montrezl. Everyone says Montrez. I say Montrezl. It's funnier. 7,700, 32 minutes, 36.5 fantasy points, 1.15. You got to get some Montrezl. And you got to not feel bad about it. I wish he was $6,800, but he isn't. You can get some. Kuzma's another guy not impressing me on his per minutes. He's got to get over 1 for me to love him. 4.98x value is okay. You can still get to him at 6,900. I think you can get 34 fantasy points for cheaper than that. And I think you can get him from Spencer Dinwiddie. 6,900. Six less minutes, 1 more fantasy point, 1.15 fantasy points per minute. 5x value. I'm going Dinwiddie before Kuzma. I don't really think Gafford gets enough minutes to make it worth it. KCP just doesn't produce at 0.59 fantasy points per minute. It makes me want to get sick, I guess, maybe a little, and not like a cold sick, but like throw up sick. All right, you guys, get some Beal, get some Harrell. Feel free to get Dinwiddie. If you don't like Dinwiddie, swap out Kuzma, but you're going to lose a couple points in my opinion. So that's it for Toronto and Washington. 211.5 is the total on that one, by the way. So that's a low one. Atlanta at Brooklyn, 221. That's a better total. Let's look at that game. First, I got to add these guys back in. Toronto, Atlanta, Brooklyn. Get rid of this one. Okay. So weird. Only 9 players showed up on that one. Let's see. Where did Atlanta, Brooklyn go? There it is. John Collins with a Q tag. That's weird. Okay, we're going to look at Atlanta first. Trey at 8,700 still seems like a broken price to me. I mean, with his ceiling. 34 minutes per game, 40 fantasy points, 1.19 per minute. You're going to have, he's going to be chalky too, but you're going to have a ton of Trae Young. John Collins, listed at the Q tag. I was going to see what the heck is going on with him. All the way back to the beginning. Bogdan, lower back, probable tag though. John Collins, listed with a Q tag, some kind of a foot strain. First of a back-to-back, so it says there's a real chance he'll skip this one. You're going to have to keep an eye closer to the game. It says they'll know closer to shoot around. So Collins might play. I haven't heard different. There is a Q tag on him. That's the first I've heard this. So usually when it says that, it's a true game time decision, it's half an hour after lock. It's tough for me. It's tough for me. I might just take him all the way out of the pool. And then if I miss on him, I miss on him. But it is what it is with that foot issue. It's not likely he's going to have a huge giant night anyway. Interesting. So that's one of those ones we'll kind of write down and come back to closer to lock. Trey, you got to get his usage is 31. That's crazy. Collins, that's a decision you're going to have to make. Capella, 6,400, 1.12 fantasy points per minute. You can You're just not getting 30 fantasy points a game at 6,400. That's not 5x value for me. Cam Reddish is a guy people love, and I love to not play him. 0.95 fantasy points per minute. 23 a game is not enough. Bogdanovich, we know what he's capable of. He just hasn't shown it to us. DeAndre Hunter, we know what he's capable of. 0.57 fantasy points per minute is worthless in the NBA. So he needs to go out of this lineup. We need to get Herter back in. Yes, Herter hasn't performed, but if you look at 0.57 for Hunter per minute versus 0.62 for Herter per minute, I mean, you got to switch him, in my opinion. You got to switch him. If John Collins doesn't play, I'm not sure who they're going to put in. I mean, looking down the list here, is Gallo? He's not on the injury report, so maybe you'll have to get to some Gallinari if John Collins doesn't play. Gorgie Jang is awesome. Who doesn't love Gorgie? Everybody does. He's 3,800, so he could get some minutes if Collins is out. Those are the guys I think you're going to have to look at, Gallinari and Jang. So feel free to look at those guys if it turns out that Collins is out. I will have to look a little closer to lock. Okay, let's look at the next team here, you guys. And I got to hurry. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with OBS today, but it's wanting to disconnect. Maybe that's my internet. I don't know. So, I don't know. If you're watching this and you see something weird happening, let me know. I mean, I'm still showing that I'm live. All right. Anyway, hope it's not too messed up, you guys. What's the next team? I don't know. Denver at Memphis. I mean, you might end up with a bunch of this game. Okay. Let's see. We're going to add this back in. What was Brooklyn? Yeah, Claxton and Kyrie. That's the only injuries in that one. Denver, Memphis. Here we go. Team. Denver. Start there. Denver's been a kind of a weird team this year so far. Let's look for injuries from Denver. Kankar and Murray we know about. While we're looking at it, Dallas also. Kleber still out. Porzingis might be back. Hopeful that Kristaps will be able to play in Wednesday's game against the Spurs. Wait, against the Spurs? What day is it? Is that the matchup? Why does this say Memphis? Well, I don't know what the heck's going on now. Is today Thursday, you guys? I don't even know. No, it says Wednesday. So maybe that's just wrong. Because it says Denver, Memphis, 4.4 hours. So that's what we're going to go with, Denver, Memphis. So I don't know why it says Spurs. I think they played last night. I think that was last night's game. So I think they're hoping for him to come back tonight. Will he play 30, 40 minutes? I don't think so. Not when you're that fragile. Luka, Tim Hardaway, Dorian Finney-Smith, Kristaps the Q-Tag, and Dwight Powell. That's your Denver. That's your Dallas starting lineup. We're not looking at Dallas, though. Denver. I'm looking at the wrong thing, you guys. I'm all confused about that report that had yesterday's game in the wrong spot. Monty Morris, Will Barton, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, and Jokic. That seems a little better. Jokic, 11,200. I mean, for his ceiling, it's still, I mean, it's hard because he's so expensive. But 30 minutes a game, 52 fantasy points, 1.72 fantasy points per minute. I mean, that's a guy, you're going to have to get to some of him whether you like it or not. There's other pay-up options, but even at 11.2, that might end up being like a sort of contrarian option, which is weird. Porter is getting a little better, but 0.79 fantasy points per minute this season is nothing to me. That's not something I'm interested in. Will Barton, I've played quite a bit of, 0.91 fantasy points per minute. I'm not sure on this matchup so much against Memphis. A lot of uninspiring players in this team. Aaron Gordon does nothing for me at 0.8 fantasy points per minute. Monte Morris, same thing. Monte Morris's price at 4,700 is great, but 19 fantasy points per game does nothing for me. Then you got a bunch of guys that play like between 13 and 17 minutes and don't really produce. The only one that does so far, as far as per minutes, is Bones Highland, but he's only getting 13 minutes. So 1.14 fantasy points per minute. That's the only other guy other than Jokic getting over a fantasy point per minute. But 13 minutes, I mean, it's totally worthless as far as DFS goes. Basketball, fine, but DFS, no way. So if you're looking at Denver, it's Jokic and nobody. Get you some Barton, potentially. I mean, if you have to play Denver, I mean, Porter can go off, but ever since he got his paycheck, he hasn't. So that's been a rough thing for me. Let's look at Memphis. We have to get through these games. Luckily, some of these games are just really bad. So Morant at 9,500, 47 fantasy points a game, 5x value. You're going to have to get to Ja. Denver, I'll give it up to him. I like Morant tonight. Jaren Jackson Jr., a fantasy point per minute guy, $6,300. That's cool. I don't mind him. DeAnthony Melton's. Oh, excuse me. Wow, came out of nowhere. DeAnthony Melton's a guy getting a fantasy point per minute. So is Steven Adams. Both of those guys getting between 27 and 30 fantasy points per game at pretty decent salaries, $5,900 and $6,000. You're going to need a little of them. I mean, I've been getting to Melton. I've been getting to Bane. Bane's 0.94 per minute, so that's not super great, but he's had some good performances when he needs to. There's really nobody else. Nobody else to even talk about. These guys, I'll get in 13 low minutes. I mean, people like Kyle Anderson as a 1.0 fantasy point per minute guy, but at 22 minutes, you're going to have to hope that you're going to have some inclination that he's going to get more than 22 minutes. If you have to fill in a GPP or something, he has $5,000. So let's look at Memphis's injuries. Still just Dylan Brooks. Morant, Melton, Bane, Jackson Jr., Steven Adams. So get some Morant, get some Jackson. I'm going to get to Melton and Bane a little, but not tons. Add them back in. Next game. Clippers at Minnesota. 212.5 looks painful. That one looks just utterly painful. We're going to start with the clip show. Let's go up here. Marcus Morris, Jason Preston, Kawhi, of course, Ibaka, of course. We know about that. Starting lineup, Reggie Jackson, Eric Bledsoe, Paul George, Batum, Zubats. Against the Wolves, I hate to say it, they're a heck of a defensive team, but they can't score. They're shooting like 20-some%. It's just ridiculous. Their defense is crazy good, but you have to put the ball in the hole to win. So no matter what. Paul George has been paying dividends. Every time I play him, I win money. So I'm going to get to some Paul George at 10,500. Probably my preferred pay-up option against Minnesota. He likes to go bananas. Against Jackson, less per minute, but against a team like the Wolves, it's a night where he can definitely show out. So get a little Reggie Jackson. I'm skipping Morris. You can get to a little Terrence Mann if you want because of the matchup. Eric Bledsoe I like at 4,600. That seems like pretty good value to me. 0.9 fantasy points per minute. Definitely gets over 5x value. Batum I hate. Always have. You've heard me say it. Vastly overpaid throughout his career, but 27 minutes per game. You can get to a little. He's a guy that's likely to make 9 threes against the Timberwolves team just because of who he's playing. So I don't know. Zubats I don't like. Skip Zubats. But that's it. No, that's it. So I'm going to get a ton of Paul George and a little of a couple of these other guys. Bledsoe, Jackson, Terrence Mann. Maybe 2% Batum, just to say you did. I don't know. Why not? Let's look at the Wolves, who are my Timberwolves. Minnesota sports is a curse. It just is what it is. Cat, 10,400. I like that as a pay-up option against the Clip. I think he historically owns Zubats, 1.3 fantasy points per minute, 47 a game. Anthony Edwards, 38 a game on 1.08 fantasy points per minute. Russell's out tonight, so look to get some Pat Bev, who's a 1.14 fantasy point per minute guy. Option today. He's going to get extra minutes, 24 minutes right now. He'll probably get closer to 30 tonight with no Russell. So play a bunch of Beasley. Play a bunch of Pat Bev, Anthony Edwards. Get some Towns. You know who these guys are. Against the Clip, it's going to be a sort of a drag-out game. Dallas at San Antonio, 217. 217 is the total in that one. Let me get it up for you here. Dallas at San Antonio. Well, we know where we're going on this matchup, at least a little, starting with Dallas. I think we went over the starting lineups and injuries already. Luka, Tim Hardaway, DFS, Porzingis, Dwight Powell, Porzingis with a Q tag. I don't look at him like he's going to get much minutes, so for me, he's going to be a fade. Luka at 10-3, I mean, he should be 12-3 just because of his ceiling. I mean, he's a 1.29 fantasy point per player this game, or per game player this year. But look for an explosion from this guy any night. He all of a sudden he'll get 75 fantasy points. So you're going to have to think about that. 34 minutes, 44 fantasy points. Kristaps, $7,000. 26 minutes, he'll probably get more like 20 tonight, 18 to 22. If I'm managing him, that's what I'm doing. You can get to a little DFS. He doesn't really produce. Tim Hardaway doesn't really produce. Dwight Powell doesn't really produce. I think Tim Hardaway had a pretty good game yesterday at $5,000. I mean, it's a good option. These guys have real low usage, real low per minute scores so far. I need to see more out of them. Brunson will probably bear the pun again, the brunt of Kristaps coming back. Just, I don't know how many minutes he'll end up with that now. 26 per game so far, 0.96 fantasy points per minute. 5.49x value is the only guy on the team getting 5x value or better. With Kleber out, maybe we can still keep some Brunson. Everybody else is a fade, in my opinion. There's not anybody else. I mean, if Boban gets some minutes at 3,700, let's say he gets 15 minutes, that'd be cool. Because then you're going to get 20, 25 fantasy points for almost a mim. That's it for Dallas. Let's look at the Spurs. I've been playing a lot of Spurs lately. A lot of Spurs. Never the right ones, but I've played a lot of Spurs. DeJounte, he's been a good player. 34 fantasy. Man, come on, you guys. Seriously. Need my email updates right now. I'm going to fix that. DeJounte Murray for 8,900, 34 minutes, 44 fantasy points, 1.3 fantasy points per game, basically 5x value. I've had Murray in a lot of lineups. It's worked out well for me. Pirtle, same thing. Getting almost 30 minutes, but 34 fantasy points, basically 1.13 fantasy points per minute. Like Pirtle. I like him in this matchup.